The story of a plant that kept entire communities alive during World War II. A crop so productive and so easy to grow that it became a lifeline when everything else failed. And then, almost as soon as the war ended, people stopped growing it entirely. The Jerusalem artichoke, also known as the sunchoke, went from saving lives to being completely abandoned within a single generation, and the reasons why reveal something uncomfortable about how we choose what to eat. The Jerusalem artichoke isn't actually an artichoke, and it has nothing to do with Jerusalem. It's a member of the sunflower family, native to North America, and it produces edible tubers underground that look something like ginger root. Indigenous peoples across North America cultivated this plant for centuries before European explorers arrived. And when those explorers brought it back to Europe in the early 1600s, it became genuinely popular. France embraced it. Other European countries grew it widely. For a time, it seemed like this strange tuber from the New World might become a staple crop. Then the potato showed up and changed everything. By the 1800s, the potato had taken over. It was easier to peel, easier to store, and more versatile in the kitchen. The Jerusalem artichoke faded into obscurity, grown only in scattered gardens and by people who remembered the old ways. It became a footnote in agricultural history. And then the wars came. Number 1, the wartime revival. When World War II disrupted food supplies across Europe, people faced a terrifying question. How do you feed a population when your agricultural system has collapsed, when fuel is rationed, when fertilizer is unavailable, when the men who work the farms are fighting overseas? The answer, for many communities, turned out to be a plant that most people had forgotten existed. The Jerusalem artichoke offered something that almost no other crop could match during wartime conditions. It grew in soil too poor for potatoes. It survived drought. It needed almost no fertilizer. It had few pest problems. It required none of the sophisticated agricultural equipment that sat idle for lack of fuel. And perhaps most importantly, it could be left in the ground through the winter and harvested only when needed, eliminating the storage problems that plagued other crops. In Germany and occupied territories across Europe, the Jerusalem artichoke became what some called the war tuber. Communities that might have starved instead survived on this strange, knobby root that grew almost anywhere you planted it. The plant grows tall, reaching anywhere from 5 to 10 feet in height, and produces yellow flowers that look like small sunflowers. Below ground, it develops clusters of tubers that can be eaten raw or cooked. One planting can produce food year after year because the Jerusalem artichoke is a perennial. Miss a few tubers during harvest, and they'll sprout again the following spring. In fact, the plant propagates so enthusiastically that it can become difficult to get rid of once established. During the war, that aggressive growth habit was a feature rather than a bug. Plant it once, harvest it forever. For villages struggling to survive, this represented security in an insecure world. Number 2, nutritional profile. The Jerusalem artichoke provided more than just calories during those desperate years. The tubers contain iron, potassium, and B vitamins, including a good amount of thiamine. They have no fat and roughly 73 calories per 100 grams. They're lower in starch than potatoes, which made them valuable for people managing blood sugar, even before anyone fully understood why. But the most significant nutritional component, and the one that would later contribute to the plant's downfall, is inulin. Inulin is a type of dietary fiber that the Jerusalem artichoke contains in abundance. Today we recognize inulin as a prebiotic, meaning it feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Health food stores sell inulin supplements. Functional foods brag about containing it. From a modern nutritional perspective, that high inulin content looks like a selling point. During the war, nobody cared about prebiotics. They cared about survival. And the Jerusalem artichoke delivered. Number 3. Why we stopped growing it. The war ended. The soldiers came home. Food supplies normalized. And almost immediately, people across Europe stopped planting Jerusalem artichokes. The reasons break down into 3 categories. And understanding all 3 explains why a genuinely useful crop can disappear from our food system almost overnight. The first reason is psychological. Eating Jerusalem artichokes reminded people of the worst years of their lives. Every bite brought back memories of hunger, of fear, of occupation, of loss. The tuber that had kept them alive became impossible to look at without remembering what they had survived. This psychological dimension runs deeper than simple association. In Germany, a similar phenomenon had already occurred with the rutabaga after World War I. The winter of 1916 to 1917, when the German potato crop failed and rutabagas became the only food available, became known as the turnip winter. The trauma of that period was so severe that many Germans refused to eat rutabaga for the rest of their lives. That aversion passed down to their children and grandchildren. The Jerusalem artichoke inherited this same stigma during World War II. It became marked as desperation food, as poor people's food, as a reminder of everything people wanted to forget. Parents who had survived the war refused to serve it to their children. The association proved more powerful than any nutritional benefit. Number 4, the third reason is economic and political. Post-war agricultural policy across Europe and North America favored industrialized commodity crops. Governments invested in research programs for wheat, corn, soybeans, and potatoes. They built infrastructure for storing and transporting these crops. They created subsidy systems that rewarded farmers for growing them. The Jerusalem artichoke received none of this support. No significant breeding programs worked to develop better varieties. No commercial infrastructure existed for large-scale production. No subsidies encouraged farmers to plant it. The crop that had fed villages during the war simply didn't fit into the agricultural system that emerged after the war ended. And so it disappeared. Not completely, but almost. Reduced to a curiosity, grown by scattered enthusiasts. A footnote in gardening books, a memory that faded with the generation that had depended on it. Number 5, what we lost. Here's where the story becomes relevant to the present moment. The Jerusalem artichoke possesses agricultural characteristics that we desperately need as climate change transforms growing conditions around the world. It tolerates drought. It grows in poor soil. It requires minimal fertilizer and pesticides. It produces food reliably under conditions that would stress or kill other crops. It can help remediate degraded and marginal soils. These traits made it valuable during wartime, and they make it potentially valuable again as we face a future of water scarcity, soil degradation, and unpredictable weather patterns. The plant also offers something that modern industrial agriculture has largely abandoned: resilience through diversity. Our food system depends on a remarkably small number of crops, and that concentration creates vulnerability. When a disease hits wheat or corn or potatoes, the consequences ripple through the entire system. A more diverse agricultural base, including crops like the Jerusalem artichoke that can produce food under marginal conditions, provides insurance against catastrophic failure. Some people are beginning to recognize this. The Jerusalem artichoke has experienced a small revival among organic and sustainable farming communities, among foraging and wild food enthusiasts, among health food advocates interested in its prebiotic benefits, and among permaculture practitioners who value its perennial nature and low input requirements. The food industry has even found commercial uses for it. Jerusalem artichokes grown in France, the Netherlands, and Germany are processed to extract inulin, which then goes into dietary fiber supplements, sugar substitutes for diabetics, and functional food products. The same compound that causes digestive distress when you eat the whole tuber, becomes a valuable ingredient when isolated and added to other foods in controlled amounts. But as a food crop, as something people actually grow and eat and serve to their families, the Jerusalem artichoke remains marginal. The stigma has faded with the passing of the generation that lived through the war, but the crop never recovered its place in our agricultural system. Number 6, the lesson. We like to think that our food choices are rational, that we eat what's nutritious and practical and economical. The story of the Jerusalem artichoke suggests something different. We abandoned a crop that grows almost anywhere, requires almost nothing, and produces food reliably year after year. We abandoned it because it reminded us of hard times. We abandoned it because it made some people gassy. We abandoned it because it didn't fit into the industrial agricultural system we were building. None of these reasons had anything to do with whether the plant could actually feed people. The same pattern has played out with other crops throughout history. Foods associated with poverty or hardship get abandoned as soon as people can afford to eat something else, regardless of their actual nutritional or agricultural value. And the social meaning of food often matters more than its practical utility. This creates a strange situation. The crops that can save us during hard times are precisely the crops we refuse to grow during good times. We only rediscover them when we're desperate, and we abandon them again as soon as the crisis passes. The Jerusalem artichoke fed entire villages during World War II. It asked for almost nothing in return, and we thanked it by pretending it didn't exist for the next 80 years. Number 7, where we are now, the climate is changing. Water is becoming scarce in regions that used to have plenty. Soil degradation is accelerating. The industrial agricultural system that replaced traditional diverse farming is showing its vulnerabilities. Maybe it's time to reconsider what we threw away. The Jerusalem artichoke isn't going to replace potatoes or wheat or corn. That's not the point. The point is that we have options we've forgotten about. Crops that our grandparents and great-grandparents knew how to grow. Plants that can produce food under conditions that would defeat the crops we depend on today. The digestive issues are real, but they're also manageable. Cooking methods can reduce the inulin content. Starting with small amounts allows your gut bacteria to adapt. Some varieties cause fewer problems than others. Though without proper breeding programs, those varieties remain difficult to find. The storage problems are solvable too. The same permaculture practitioners who are reviving interest in the Jerusalem artichoke have developed techniques for extending storage life and managing the plant's aggressive spreading habit. What we lack isn't knowledge or capability. What we lack is willingness to look past the stigma, to see this plant for what it actually is, rather than what it represents in our collective memory. A plant that can grow in poor soil with minimal water and no fertilizer, that returns year after year without replanting, that produces nutritious food through the winter when other crops have been harvested, that requires no special equipment or expertise to cultivate. That's not a desperation food. That's a gift. We stopped growing it because we could afford to stop, because we wanted to forget, because it didn't fit the system we were building. But the system we built is starting to show cracks. And somewhere in the back gardens and the permaculture plots and the sustainable farming experiments, the Jerusalem artichoke is still there, waiting for us to remember what we knew during the hardest years of the 20th century. Sometimes the plants that save us aren't the ones we love. They're the ones we need. Thanks for watching.